Hey, it's Austin. It's grade 24. I just wanted to show you this again. Um, sorry. This is what the picture looks like. This is part 2 of my thing. And now I'm gonna show you how each team did. Never mind, I'm not. Maybe I am. Sorry, hold on a second. If I can get this down. They had ties in this season in 2002. Sorry, I'm just getting into the playoffs here. Um, sorry, I'm just gonna start right here. Hold on a sec. Um, so this is all New Jersey, Carolina's thing. This is the Carolinas website, so I just wanted to tell you this. So they beat the Jersey, 2-1. I think this is, yeah, this is a Carolinas website, so I can get Carolina stuff. So they beat New Jersey 2-1, and then they also won 2-1 in overtime, and then they lost 0-4, 1-3, and won 3-2 in overtime, and won 1-0. And that was in six. And remember, they played New Jersey in the first round of this year. And then they went to play Montreal in the best of seven, where they won 2-0, lost 1-4, lost in overtime 2-1, and then won 4-3, 5-1, and 8-2. The funniest thing is about 8-2 game, I actually won. It came back in the third period down 8-2 and won it in a shootout. And I did that again and won it in overtime or 10-8. And then here's another thing. And then they played in the conference final against Toronto, who actually lost 1-2. And then Carolina won 2-1 in 2 times, both in overtime in game second and third. And then in the fourth game, Carolina won 3-0, then lost in the fifth game 1-0, and then they won against Toronto in the sets 2-1. And then in Detroit, was the last team they played in the 2002 thing, and they ended up winning. They ended up winning 3-2 in overtime, 1-3 in just yeah, Detroit, and then they lost 1-3 at Detroit, and then they lost in overtime 2-3 in 3 overtimes in the third overtime, and then they lost 3-0 and 1-3 all to Detroit. So they won only one game against Detroit. So yes, that's where I have it in here. Unfortunately, I can't get the other things in this program because it's the Carolinas website, so it won't let you. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Let me try it. I don't think I can. Maybe I can. Nope, I can't. I can. Never mind. This is Toronto's. Where I see I can. Never mind. I can't do it. This is Toronto's thing. How they when it's 3-1. Sorry, I can actually get it. They won 3-1 and against the New York Islanders. This is at home. 2-0 at home. And they lost 1-6 and 3-4 in the New York Islanders. And then they won 6-3 at home. And then they lost 3-5 at New York Islanders. And at home they won 4-2. They won all their home games. Lost all the road games. And then this one they lost 5-0 at home, and then won 3-2 in 3 overtimes against Ottawa in the second round, and at home. And then in Ottawa they lost 2-3, but rebounded and won 2-1 in the next game. And then they lost at home 2-4 in the game 5. They won in game 6 4-3, and then they lost 3-0. And they played Carolina, and they ended up losing 2-1 in Carolina, and then Carolina they lost 1-2 in overtime, and then 1-2 in overtime, and then 3-0 and at home, and then they won 1-0 game 6 in Carolina, and then they lost 2-1 in overtime at home. So that was the whole thing in the whole series. And that Awesome is Great is done for this. I'm not gonna review all the series because it would take too long. It may be another time, but not right now. For maybe part 3, I will. But I just wanted to tell you the story about Carolina and Toronto, and then next I might review Detroit and Colorado next. I might do that right now too. I'm not too sure. Let me see. I'm also gonna do it Detroit and then Colorado, and then I'm done. If I can get it. Alright, so Detroit, here it goes. Detroit played Vancouver, and this is in Detroit. So, and they lost 4-3, and they lost in at home 5-2, and then they won 2 in Vancouver, 3-1, 4-2, and they came back home, won game 5-4-0, and then in Vancouver they won 6-4. So they won all their games in Vancouver, except the first one. And the second one. They won all the games in Vancouver and only lost at home. That's silly Detroit. And then they played St. Louis. They won 2-0, 3-2, and then they lost 1-6 in St. Louis as their first road loss. And then they won 4-3 and then 4-0. And then they won 5-3. They lost 3-4 in overtime. Both in Detroit. They won 1 in Detroit 5-3, and then 3-4 they lost in Detroit. And then in Colorado they won 2-1 and lost 2-3, and then at home they lost 1-2 in overtime. And they went to Colorado, won 2-0, and they came back home for game 7 and won 7-0. And then Detroit lost 2-3 in overtime at home, and then they won 3-1 at home, and then 3-2 in 3 overtimes, Carolina, and then 3-0, and then came back home and won 3-1. And now I'm going to tell you the Colorado story, if I can get it in a sec. And then this will be the last one, and then I will replay. But this is Colorado, how they won 4-3 in Colorado, then 5-3 in Colorado, and then 1-3, and then they win 1-0 in Los Angeles, and then lost 1-0 at home in overtime. And then they went to Los Angeles, lost 1-3, and then they came back home and won 4-0 in Colorado, and then they played San Jose in the conference semifinals, and they lost 3-6 at home, and then they won 8-2, and then they lost 4-6, and then they won 4-1 in San Jose, and they lost 3-5 at home, and then they won 2-1 in overtime and 1-0. So that's here, and then they played Detroit, and they lost 3-5 in Detroit, but won 4-3 in Detroit in overtime. Came back home, lost 1-2 in overtime to Detroit, and then they won 3-2 in the next game, and then they won 2-1 in Detroit in overtime, and then they came home, lost 0-2 and 0-7 when they went back to Detroit. And that's how the conference thing is. And then I'm going to tell you all the other results in this after, not including Carolina, Toronto, Detroit, or Colorado in part 3. Awesome is great is done.